What's up, girls? I just read The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. I've been reading it as a part of Professor Y. Chi Dimmock's Yale Open Course class on Hemingway, Faulkner, Fitzgerald. It's such an amazing course. I definitely recommend it. Those courses in general are so cool. Like, Yale basically has like an entire humanities degree, an entire STEM degree listed on YouTube for free, and it's basically just like an audit of an Ivy League course, which is so cool. I tried to read this book, The Sound and the Fury by Faulkner, I guess like 6 years ago now. I was probably 21, and I was like at a dinner or something, and somebody a little bit older than me told me it was their favorite book. So I picked it up like kind of out of context and tried to read it, and I didn't understand it at all. I didn't understand that the first section was written from the perspective of someone with a mental disability. And so I totally bounced off it. I just thought I was like, and I wasn't a good enough reader at the time, really, is also the truth. But revisiting it so many years later, after doing a lot of reading and kind of like just understanding like anecdotally where Faulkner exists in the Western canon, in American modernism, it was really cool to read this time around. And I still missed a couple things, you know? This course has 4 lectures on the book. The book is written in 4 sections, so it's about 320 pages, and it takes place in 4 different sections that are all from different perspectives. And the great thing about the course is there's a lecture on each section, so that really helped me understand what was going on. Even this time around, like, I consider myself to be a pretty good reader at this point, but some things still went over my head. It does still kind of require, you know, more of a careful and thoughtful read than I'm used to giving. But yeah, such an amazing book. The interesting thing is, so the first 3 sections are written in first person, all from the perspective of different brothers. And the cool thing is you're kind of thrown into this like confusion. You don't really understand what's going on, because the first character has a mental disability. And then it's almost like a puzzle is like slowly coming together. And then it jumps to the second section, which is, the first section's from the perspective of Benji, the second section's from the perspective of Quentin. And Quentin is very smart. He's a freshman at Harvard, but he's very neurotic as well. So his mind is kind of jumping all over the place. He has all of these pathways open, and that's still a little bit difficult to read. And then you get to the third brother, Jason, in section 3, and he's intelligent as well, but he's more of an everyman, kind of like blue collar guy who reads the newspaper, and he's also like very hateful. He's like such an awful person, but he does really turn a phrase well, and he's also very compelling in why he is a hateful person. You know, Faulkner sets that up very well. So once I got to the third section, I just like basically plowed through the rest of the book in a day. And then the last section is third person omniscient, and I think it's really cool that he does that as well. You know, the title itself is taken from Macbeth, and I'll butcher doing the entire line here, but The Sound and the Fury is directly from Macbeth, and the longer quote is relevant to the book as well, because it has to do with why he has the first section from Benji's perspective. It has to do with time. All that to say, The Sound and the Fury is kind of a late, I think it was written in the 1930s, kind of American tragic version of Macbeth. Or is it Hamlet? Shoot, I might actually be wrong, but I think it's actually Hamlet. No, Macbeth. Anyway, Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay, I guess I'll go through a couple of the things that I loved about the book without trying to spoil it. Professor Dimmock has this thing about Benji in the first section that I thought was very interesting. It was talking about the kind of global perception of mental disabilities in the early 1900s, in that they took a quantitative approach, which is no longer in fashion today, but they would basically quantify someone's mental capacities by saying, someone who had arrested development between the ages of 2 and 7 was considered to be an imbecile, as an actual clinical turn of phrase. I know today it's just kind of like an insult. And then I believe someone from 7 to 12 then was a moron. And that was a scientific, clinical phrase. And so the Benji character is supposed to exist somewhere in the place of ages 2 to 4, even though he's a 33-year-old man. And Professor Dimmock talks about something really profound that I had never really thought of. And that's why I love reading books like this, is it really gets me thinking, new thoughts, which is exciting for me. But they talk about the oppressive nature of Benji's innocence, which is kind of an interesting thing culturally, I think, because I think, at least in American history, innocence would be considered a bad thing, especially as a man, up until kind of the last 30 or 40 years ago. I feel there's kind of been this big cultural shift towards maintaining innocence and trying to preserve a childlike sense of wonder. But innocence in the context of Benji is he's very sensory. He's obsessed with smell, primarily the smell of his sister Candace. And as she gets a little bit older and is she's in the mud in one scene, if she doesn't smell right, it really throws Benji into emotional turmoil. And because he can't accept that, she's going to smell different, which is emblematic of her becoming a woman, he's really oppressing her in an interesting way. Because he can't accept that she's changing, she has to kind of cater herself to him. And that was a really cool spin on innocence that I'd never really thought of. So that was super fascinating. The second section, I think, has the most beautiful prose. That's Quentin's section, and I feel the most sorry for Quentin. Actually, Quentin and Candace both. I feel pretty bad for. There's a lot of sympathetic characters, but the prose is really beautiful in the second section. I think because Quentin is so intelligent. Jason feels that he's been slighted by his father relative to the treatment that the other siblings got, and it just turns him into a complete monster. Just horrible, total monster. And I think that's true, that, people respond that way psychologically. If they feel their family or the world doesn't appreciate their gifts relative to other people, they can become a monster. That's kind of their, silver lining they create for each other, for themselves. They get sympathy at least, which is kind of a victim, mentality. And then after we have this, tragic structure through the first 3 chapters of this white Southern family in post-slavery, I guess pre-civil rights, where are they? Missouri. Then it shifts to third person, and you kind of get insight to the black servants of the household, Disley and Luther. And, their reality is actually much more difficult than the white family, but they don't have space to even really have a tragedy. And I think that's very profound that Faulkner puts that in at the end, and it kind of reframes, the entire book. Anyway, I'm out of time. Thanks for watching.